2015. My name is Seth Milliken, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Transportation Alliance. This is the 8th and final installment of our digital series this year on Experience the Experts. We set out this year to help recontextualize some of the issues around transportation in the wake of the passage of House Bill 170, to help folks think through some of the issues that we will be working on and will become topics of discussion in the transportation arena moving forward. So we've talked about transit, we've talked about airports, we've talked about freight and logistics in the port. And so today we're going to both recognize and discuss one of the more important priorities that we have as a state, and one of the more important partnerships we have in this transportation area, and that's with our local governments. Our cities and counties in Georgia, our transportation area, they're responsible for the maintenance of a vast portion of Georgia's road and bridge network, and so will be a key participant in a more flexible form of the T-Splost moving forward into the future, and our panelists are going to talk a little bit about that today. So without further ado, I will introduce them and then turn the line over to them, and then after their presentations we'll have some time for Q&A. Just as a reminder, if you have questions or comments, you can submit them through your user interface. You can type those in, and then I will read those out for discussion at the end of the broadcast. So without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists to you. Very grateful to have with us today Ross King, who's the Executive Director of the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. ACCG has been just a fabulous partner with the Georgia Chamber and with the Georgia Transportation Alliance, working on issues over the years. They were a key part of the coalition that worked for the passage of House Bill 170, and Ross has been in leadership positions with ACCG since 1987 and was appointed as Executive Director in May of 2010. Ross is very involved in his local community and obviously a great civic and community leader in Georgia. He's a graduate of the University of Tennessee, and as a Georgia Bulldog, I will overlook that for the moment. They had a much better football year than we did. So Douglas Hooker is the director of the Atlanta Regional Commission. The ARC has also been an excellent partner of ours over the years, particularly as we've worked on transportation and water issues over the years. Doug is a graduate of Leadership Atlanta, Leadership Georgia, and RLI. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech and has been in leadership over at ARC for several years. And so very grateful to have both of these guys with us. We've been very blessed at GTA over the last couple of years as we've worked on various policy solutions to have representation and expertise from a number of different industry sectors within transportation. And I think those relationships and that experience has been a key part of our success. And so Doug and Ross are both excellent examples of that. Very grateful to have them with us today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ross, who's going to lead us off, and then he'll turn it over to Doug, and then we'll have time for some questions and answers after that. So Ross, thank you for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Seth, and it's my honor to be here on behalf of our leadership and our staff to talk to our attendees today in regard to the critical topic of transportation finance. I want to thank the Chamber and the Georgia Transportation Alliance for the leadership role that they played, and it's my distinct honor to be with my dear friend Doug Hooker on this webinar today. The association has been deeply involved with transportation since our founding back in 1914. In fact, it's not known by many, but Georgia commissioners at one point in time were known as commissioners of roads and revenues prior to becoming commissioners. State law has changed about 3 decades ago. We are intimately involved in transportation issues. As you'll note on the screen, counties are responsible for over 70% of the road network, and over 8,000 bridges and culverts in the state fall under the domain of our 159 counties. Extremely pleased that the Joint Study Committee was established by the legislature, and we were not only a proud participant but also a very proud signatory on the final report and I commend both House and Senate leadership for the work of the study committee. It laid a true foundation to put us in the position where we had a leadership that was able to go ahead and sign off on law that is now being talked about on a national scale. Because of our advanced leadership of the association and the work of our policy council, we were able to stay the course, and I'm extremely proud of that. We never wavered. There were some challenges when House Bill 170 was first introduced, but with our president, Kevin Little, at the time, and our first vice president, also at the time, Charlotte Nash, who has now become ACCG president, we took the long-range look at the legislative process and counted very heavily on the work of our policy team, led by Clint Mueller, and also the work done of Sean Adams. And so we've had a very focused approach on House Bill 170 and later on House Bill 106, and took tremendous pride in the partnership working with our industry stakeholders and obviously the leadership in the General Assembly, as I mentioned earlier. Key provisions, and I'm going to give an overview prior to turning this over to Doug, but there are key provisions within these new laws that are on the books, not the least of which is this first bullet point, the increase in the local maintenance improvement grants, otherwise known as LMIG, and the establishment of the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, GTIB, flexibility on the regional T-SPLOST, which was critical, and I'm going to tip my hat to Senator Williams for the work that was done in regard to House Bill 106, with a very important provision as it related to new single county T-SPLOST that is now part of state law. To increase funding for LMEG, the current funding is roughly $100 million, about 12%. Law requires a minimum of 10% appropriations by the state and a maximum of 20%. Currently at 10% funding, every cent per gallon increase in state excise is expected to generate an additional $6 million in LMIG funding. And because of what we have witnessed here, we're paying close attention to data coming in to the state. There's an expected increase in the FY amended supplemental budget of $36 million, and also an increase in the FY17 budget of $42 million, and we are ahead of schedule, as you'll note on the screen. And we have sense that that will continue. In regard to the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, there's going to be a recapitalization which will provide an opportunity for more awards for local projects, and that is good news on a statewide basis. There is certainly preference that's going to be granted to rural counties. We take a tremendous amount of pride in being a statewide organization and having sensitivity for rural, suburban, and urban counties, and so there's a tiered approach that I didn't want to get into in the presentation today, but just the sensitivity that there's going to be benefit on a statewide basis is the important takeaway. We're working with the State Road and Toll Authority to create awareness and applications from local governments as a result of our outreach has in fact increased. Let's talk for a moment about the regional T-SPLOST and start off with what stays the same. The makeup of the roundtables, and there are people that may in fact be on this call today that were involved with their regional roundtables. That process is going to stay the same, as well as the process for selecting projects to send to the voters. The 25% discretionary money that goes back to each individual county stays the same. The lower LMIG match would go from 30% to 10%. The 10% duration will continue. Anything else not expressly addressed in either House Bill 170 or House Bill 106. And I'll make a notation here for additional information or background. I would ask those who are participating in the webinar today to take note. We do have data on the ACCG.org webpage, Q&A document, as well as some other information, and so that may draw out some background to help you with this last bullet point on what is not expressly addressed in 170 or 106. What's new in regard to the regional T-SPLOST? It does authorize counties to self-start the process of adoption of a resolution from a majority of the counties in the region. It's a very important step. There's more flexibility with elections in which to place the ballot, and we too are quite proud of that fact. The rate can now be a fractional rate up to 1% in increments of 0.05%. And then finally, requires at least 30% of the project revenue to be spent on projects identified in the statewide strategic transportation plan. Let's move over now to the single T-SPLOST and store levy and how. On or after July 1st of 2016, counties served by Greta can call the referendum. If 90% of the geographical area of a county is municipalized and 60% of the municipal population in a county can, by resolution, call for the referendum. On or after July 1st of 2017, all counties, with the exception of the 46 counties residing in the TIA area, the Transportation Investment Act regions listed below, may levy a single T-SPLOST. And it's important, again, representing a statewide organization, to amplify the work that was done by the Central Savannah area, 7th District, River Valley, 8th District, and the Heart of Valley, Altamaha, 9th District. I recall quite distinctly that I spoke on a forum for Governing Magazine in D.C. the day after the initial T-SPLOST vote was taken, and the notation from several hundred people in the audience was how unfortunate it was that the TIA lost in Georgia. And I made it very clear at that time that 46 counties had the foresight through 3 regions to go ahead and adopt that. And you'll note that on the map that's currently on the screen. You'll see the regions representing the preponderance of the Augusta metropolitan area, the Columbus metropolitan area, and then the Heart of Georgia area. And we have certainly been in close contact with all 3 of those regions in the 46 counties, and found, to our not surprise, but to great pleasure, that a number of these jurisdictions, especially those of a rural nature, have found benefit through the support that was put forth by that vote several years back. In regard to the single county T-SPLOST and rate duration, and first, it can be levied at a fractional rate of up to 1% in 0.05% increments with an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, and up to 0.75% without one. The duration is 10 years, and there's an extremely broad definition of transportation projects, and again, more of this information is on ACCG's webpage. Take a look now on the single county T-SPLOST, left-hand column on benefits and the right-hand column on limitations. In regard to benefits, dedicated transportation funding source for counties that can be used to improve road and bridge infrastructure within the county. And we're spending time talking to counties right now about their road infrastructure, but more specifically about their bridge postings and bridge infrastructure, and making sure that they're seeing opportunities on a county-by-county basis. Second, under benefits, is the opportunity to partner with neighboring counties on projects that reside in both jurisdictions. That is a phenomenal benefit that I professionally have been looking for a number of years, and we want that peer-to-peer exchange to take place, and are anxious to assist jurisdictions in that regard. And then finally, under benefits, the ability to partner with the state to accelerate the timeline on projects in the county. Now, in regard to limitations, revenues from the single county T-SPLOST must be used within the boundaries of where it was collected. And the specific notation, a county cannot use revenues towards a project or a portion of a project that resides in a neighboring county, even if the county residents directly benefit. So I amplify that particular point. And then finally, a county cannot have more than one fractional levy in effect at a time. Budget impact. There are provisions within House Bill 170 that did not include exemptions for local governments, and therefore will amount to an additional expenditure at the local government level. First, the highway impact fee for heavy trucks. There are obviously jurisdictions that own and operate the rolling stock. So those trucks that are owned and operated weighing between 15,000 and 26,000 pounds, there'll be a $50 per vehicle fee. And trucks weighing over the 26,000 pounds, there'll be a $100 per year fee. I don't think anybody on the call is unaware of this next bullet point. It's been widely amplified in the press, etc. But the hotel motel fee of $5 per night, and jurisdictions that are sending their staff around the state are paying that fee. And then finally, the incremental fuel tax. local governments must pay roughly the 18.5% per gallon more in motor fuel tax than in previous years. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Doug Hooker, and Doug will go ahead and get his presentation posted for the webinar, and at the end, then we look forward to taking questions.
Thank you, Ross. And let me begin, ladies and gentlemen, by first saying that it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and appreciate the Transportation Alliance and Seth Milliken, with whom we work so closely, to be with you this afternoon, and also to share a panel with Ross King, who's a very dear personal friend as well as a longtime associate, and ACCG and ARC have worked closely together through the years on so many things, not the least of which was supporting GTA and others in getting HB 170 adopted. So wonderful to be here. As Ross pointed out, the single county SPLOST is a potential powerful tool that counties now have option for, and we think that there's a great possibility here for counties, but there's also a possibility for them to do even some regional things, even though they may approach it as a single county SPLOST. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of that and show you what that might look like. So right now you'll see the ARC works with the governments in 10 counties and the 70, soon to be 71 cities that are part of that 10-county region. And earlier this year we developed a projection of potential funds that could be generated in each county if they were to, or if their voters were to adopt a full 1% county T-SPLOST. And I won't read the numbers to you here, but you can see over the 5-year period it's a pretty significant revenue stream, assuming that the general economy holds fairly well, totaling over $3.8 billion, and that's a lot of money that counties, at least in this area, have the potential to work with should they choose to adopt it. But we took our board through some exercises in thinking about how might counties having to vote on a single county basis think still about working on a cross-regional basis. And so let me take you through a few examples. I'll take you through some road examples, and then I'll end with a transit example, just for thought purposes. So here is an important corridor in the South Metro part of the Atlanta region, State Route 85, which connects Fayette and Clayton, and a lot of traffic between those two governments. And here you see if they were to each do a 1 cent or 1% tax, then they would raise roughly $325 million for cost of the designated improvements that both counties want to do to this road that's important to them, and the cost for that road project would be $70 million. In a similar vein, looking at the north part of our region, State Route 140, which is a crucial corridor for, especially for commuter traffic in the morning between Cherokee and Fulton, the total cost will be $275 million for the improvements to this road that have already been identified, and the two counties working together, should they wish to adopt this project and adopt the full 1 cent tax, could raise over 1.3, almost $1.4 billion, more than enough to handle this improvements in this very vital corridor. State Route 6, which connects 3 of our counties, Cobb, Douglas, and Fulton. You see here the 3 counties coming together over a 5-year period to raise close to $2 billion and use portions of that to go toward a critical road that for improvements between Cobb County and the airport that would cost roughly about $260 million. Obviously, these numbers would change with time as construction costs vary and as the economy raises or lowers the total tax revenue take, but clearly a good possible win-win-win for the 3 counties should they choose to elect to do something like this. But in order to do it, obviously, each county has to adopt their part of that project as a part of their individual referendum, and of course, their money, as Ross indicated, can only be used in their part of in their county for their part of the road. One more here of the road possibility. State Route 120 is a corridor that connects Gwinnett and Fulton in obviously the north part of the metro region. Some critical corridor improvements needed that we need right now between Johns Creek and Duluth, which is a heavily traveled corridor for a lot of commutes, both morning and evening. The total cost $120 million, and the funds generated between these two major counties more than adequate to deal with that. And then just looking at a quick possibility of a transit project, because it's part of the life of this region to some extent. If Fulton and DeKalb, which are two of the three MARTA counties now and two of the four MARTA jurisdictions, which includes the city of Atlanta, if they chose to do this important transit expansion, establishing a light rail line between the Lindbergh MARTA station and traveling out to the Avondale station in DeKalb County on the MARTA East line, it would be a $1.2 billion project, and the funds generated by those two counties, were they to adopt this, could go to pay for it in full, raising about $1.7 billion between the two counties. The chances are they would use 50% of the project costs and go to the federal government for the other 50%, but still they'd have the funds well in hand to tackle this should they choose to do that. So those are examples of some of the possibilities of regional or cross-county cooperation projects that could be done on the road and transit side. And currently, you may have heard that Fulton County itself is working very diligently toward a potential T-SPLOS next year. The county commission and the mayors of all 14 cities in Fulton are in very serious conversations about how to designate which projects or which transportation priorities to put the monies to. Again, we project that it would raise $1.2 billion over the 5-year period if they adopt the full cent sales tax. And they're currently working on how they might divide the funds according to population between the 14 cities and the county itself. And with that, those are just some examples, and I think Ross and I are both open to questions.
Well, thank you both very much for taking the time. We did have a couple of folks that sent some questions in. First one is directed towards Ross and thinking about HB 106 and the new, I guess we can call it the new T-SPLOS or whatever term we want to assign to it. What do you think will be the most attractive or the most helpful parts of this new flexible form of local transportation funding for local governments? And I know that we have 159 very different counties, but in general, what do you think will be the most helpful and most attractive part of that new mechanism moving forward?
Thank you for the question. There's no question, as I said earlier, that the DNA of county officials is strictly tied in many ways to that of transportation. And as a result of that, whether it's a rural, suburban, or urban county, throughout my 28 years with the association, I have continued, along with our staff, to be approached by a cross-section of county officials, elected and key appointed, about critical infrastructure needs as they relate to transportation. One of the things that we amplified during the TIA research that was done years ago is that while obviously what Doug has walked through in the Atlanta Regional Commission has a multitude of facets to it, there were other regions of the state where there is a single artery within the region, a transportation artery, or a core focus on moving from unpaved roads to paved roads, or a focus on aging infrastructure as it relates particularly to our bridge infrastructure base that's impacted. And for those representing chambers, they know full well that are on this call, the ability to move commerce, as well as those representing education, the ability to ensure that we are not taking school buses and commerce and moving them away from structurally unsound bridges for an extended transport. So I do think that these single county T-SPLOST options are going to allow for jurisdictions that have projects that have been sitting on the shelf in some cases for decades to move forward with an opportunity to take very viable, purposeful projects that can help benefit business and benefit movement of people from corridor to corridor to put those projects in front of the voters. By far one of the most successful capital improvement funding mechanisms throughout my career and predating me is that of the special purpose local option sales tax. When you go to the voters, you tell them what you're voting on and the term of that particular project financing. More often than not, and we see this too with the education SPLOST, the voters love the transparency. They appreciate the opportunity to have the opportunity to vote. And I'm thrilled, as are the staff and more specifically the leadership of the association, to have House Bill 106 now part of state law. And I think we'll be able to go ahead and amplify a number of very successful projects in the years to come as these projects go online.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you make a very, very good point that I'd be remiss if I didn't amplify, which is the value of the special purpose local option sales tax, which is used in almost every county around the state, and in many counties is comprised of a majority transportation project list. So it's been a very important and effective tool in building local infrastructure. And in fact, just a little anecdote, as we were sitting around as a group of stakeholders in a coalition thinking about what to do about transportation funding in the wake of T-SPLOST and when to look at transportation funding in the wake of T-SPLOST, one thing that we noticed in terms of kind of watching the ebb and flow of the political will of the electorate was the 2013 elections, when we saw local SPLOSTs pass overwhelmingly in jurisdictions that had rejected the T-SPLOST, and that was, I think, instructive for us on the policy and the political side, and it was also very encouraging as we decided to take another look at transportation funding statewide. This question also is for Ross. What do you think is the biggest challenge for counties moving forward in this if you could, target one thing, what do you think will be the biggest challenge for counties moving forward? And I think that's a good question, because for us as policy and advocacy type organizations, it's good for us to be thinking about these issues that we can support each other on.
I think immediate response to the inquiry, Seth, is the dynamic of the changing leadership roles that occur at the local government level. We've just gone through a municipal election cycle. We saw turnover occur at that level. We've got 2/3 of the 806 county commissioners that are up for re-election in the 2016 election cycle. I have been in this business for 28 years, and it wasn't odd for me back in the late 80s, early 90s to see commissioners that had been in office for 5 or 6 terms. I rarely see a commissioner in 3rd term at this point in time. And so I'm raising this particular point up because while staff may be aware, working in partnership potentially with their regional commissions or chambers, other institutions that have some length of memory on particular projects, the decision makers and their history and knowledge base isn't necessarily got the length of time and capacity to appreciate critical needs. So I think it's important. The coalition has been invaluable. What the alliance has done has been especially invaluable, and I know that this is not a role alone for a county to play. It's important that there be a dialogue among all the stakeholders, that continue over time. And as I've witnessed in my career, a law is only as good as the implementation strategy and financing plan that goes along with it. So it's not just what the state leadership did and the signature of Governor Deal. Now the work is in front of us to ensure that we amplify the availability of this law, the capacity that the law affords, and one of the things, and I'll say this in closing, that is most successful is as projects go online, the amplification of case studies and the peer-to-peer exchange that takes place. And I know that Doug and his team do that so very well at ARC. It's important for us to do that throughout the remainder of the state, and even take those 46 counties that have had success with TIA to this particular point and amplify their efforts and their project successes. So really it comes down to core education and ensuring that these newly elected officials and those with limited tenure have an appreciation about the ability and the importance of moving commerce and also safety and capacity on our roads and bridges.
Thank you. Doug, the next question is, I think, probably geared more towards ARC's sphere of influence, though I think, Ross, if you have any comments on this. You guys work with and represent the interests of 10 of the largest counties in the state. We know that we will face an increasing human population as folks move into Georgia and growth rates increase. We've been one of the fastest growing states in the country for a while now. We're also going to see a significant increase in freight traffic going through the state as we look towards the eventual completion of the Savannah Harbor expansion project. Talk a little bit about what you think the challenges are for Metro Atlanta, and then maybe how HB 170, HB 106 have enabled us to address some of those, but also, you know, what's left undone? What are some of the things that we haven't done or that we haven't talked about that we need to be looking towards moving forward?
Thank you, Seth. Great questions. I think to begin with, one of the biggest challenges for Metro Atlanta counties is coming to the realization and getting focused on how we can work with other regions around the state, because our commerce is tied together more often than we realize, and some of our local elected officials realize or see in their everyday work. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity for our board to spend time with leaders from the Savannah region, and one of the things that we spent a lot of time discussing was, in fact, how our economy is tied together and the growth of freight traffic coming from the from the seaport into the Atlanta region, and how we could work together to help strengthen infrastructure, not only in our respective ends, but also in those regions in the middle between our two regions. So one, to handle the increased freight, we got to realize it's not just a matter of what happens locally or even around our region, but it's also part of what happens in other parts of the state. We have to be good partners and good regional neighbors in that regard. I think one of the things moving forward with the tools from HB 170 we can do is very thoughtful and selective about which of our major corridors outside of the highways are significant freight corridors for either distribution of freight coming into the region or taking goods out of the region to other parts of the state and of the nation, and to see what the appetite is, because often these corridors are often heavy for other forms of vehicles, not just trucks, but see what the appetite is for those neighboring counties to try to work together using the tool of HB 170 that's available to them now to try to drive cooperative improvements to those strategic corridors like State Route 120 that I mentioned earlier, or State Route 85, which carries a lot of logistics traffic coming between Clayton and Fayette. So that's what the tool gives us, that possibility. But the work to be done, obviously, is having the elected officials who are elected to think about what's in the best interest of their county and their specific communities realize that there is some shared interest there that can be good for both counties or more than two counties on a select basis. I think we know that in the Atlanta region, one of the reasons that TIA was not that many people felt that a lot of the projects wouldn't necessarily benefit their particular local community, and that the money that they would raise otherwise might be spread around. But with this tool from HB 170, we have the opportunity to focus on specific initiatives that are mutually understandable to benefit both governments, if we're talking about two counties, or in some cases three counties, like in the case of State Route 120. So, and those are corridors, again, that are not just heavy in freight, but also other commuter and almost any time of day traffic. So it would be obvious to local residents how they can benefit by partnering with their neighboring county to improve those. So I think there's some good possibilities, and it's a good thing to have the tools available now, but we have to get to some mechanisms of ferreting out those specific targets that can help both counties and thus satisfy voters in those mutual communities.
Seth, I'd add to Doug's comments, and he was, as always, directly on point. I just want to underscore the importance of the fact that we must have communication beyond jurisdictional boundaries, and I'm not just talking about county to county, but I'm talking region to region. And then we have metropolitan marketplaces that are up aligning with state borders. And we've seen some instances, I know in one case, one of our past presidents, Lamar Parris, was talking about the dialogue that his staff and he were having with officials in North Carolina about an important road corridor. And so it's all that much more important now with the tools in force for us to ensure that we don't take for granted that a county is going to appreciate, an adjoining county is going to appreciate our thoughts and ideas, or an adjoining region is going to appreciate our thoughts and ideas. There needs to be time and effort put forth for planning and exchange. Since the Savannah Harbor was amplified, I think that a step that we're going to focus attention on is to ensure that every county in Georgia appreciates the effect that the Georgia port has, the Savannah port has, the Brunswick port has on a statewide basis. We've done this in years gone by, talking to counties as far away as Dade about the imports and exports that occur in that county as they relate back to the Savannah Harbor in particular. And then there still needs to be education on the inland ports. There needs to be continued education about the strength and viability of our largest industry, that being an agribusiness, the great work that Gary Black and his staff are doing on Georgia grown, our forestry industry, our mining industry, and others that I haven't mentioned. We need the sectors to be talking about their commodities and the transfer of those commodities, and then the jurisdictions to ensure that they're talking to neighboring counties and then specifically talking beyond the region-to-region basis.
Thank you both. I'm going to exercise a point of personal privilege for our final point of discussion. And in the wake of seeing significant funding legislation pass in Georgia, this is a question that we at the staff level and our leadership at GTA have been asking a lot of people from a variety of different mechanisms and individual meetings and interviews, and then also at the Transportation Summit we co-hosted with the Chamber and GDOT and ACCG back last month. And there's one common question that we've been asking everyone, and it is this, and I'll address this to both of you and then look forward to your response. The need for an increase in sustainable transportation funding over at DOT for our state system of roads and bridges has fairly well consumed most of the political bandwidth, so to speak, on transportation for probably the better part of 10 or 15 years. From our perspective, it now appears that we've got a lot of political bandwidth that has been freed up, which is an exciting prospect and a good opportunity. One of the things that we look forward to is working with groups like ARC and ACCG and GMA and GDOT and others to talk about what ought to be next. And so I think we've touched around this question, in some of the other conversations we've had today. But just to state it more directly, in your opinion, you both obviously have a lot of experience and a lot of tenure working in this area in Georgia. We have a lot of political bandwidth that has suddenly become available on this issue. So what ought to be next? I'll kick it to Doug, and then Ross, if you'd like to wrap up, that'd be great.
Thank you, Seth. I think for the Atlanta region, that's a very specific answer or a specific response, which is that we need more sustainable funding for transit. It is clear from our public opinion polls that we've done for the last 3 years of the region, in which we've asked 5,000 residents or more each year what's the importance of transit relative to our development and economic competitiveness needs, that there is a growing and strong plurality of residents who feel we need to expand transit options. That not necessarily associated with MARTA. Some people feel that way. Some people feel it's not necessarily MARTA, but the fact that we have more options for transit or non-single occupant vehicle options for getting around and connecting closer to places of home and places of work as lifestyle choices, and also as a choice for competitiveness as we attract more residents and population from around the nation and from around the world. That's very Atlanta specific, but I believe that there are probably a number of places throughout Georgia that probably would want to have also more transit investment. It may not be the heavy rail kind of thing, but increasing or making their bus systems more robust, I think is probably something many of our metro regions around the state are seeing an increased call for. So for us, is that option? Where can we get sustainable increase in sustainable funding for transit, I think?
Seth, without question, it took quite a long to experience what occurred in the 2015 legislative session, and I think that's a lesson to all, that it did take time, it took effort, we experienced failure, and we also realized that we needed to transition, and the establishment of the alliance and the open dialogue has been helpful, but we certainly cannot and should not declare victory. I think that we need to take lessons, as I stated earlier, in regard to the project successes that occur over the next several years. We need to ensure that there is a continued open exchange, and that we need to realize that today more so than ever before, the alliance must stay in close contact, that we need to realize that each and every region of the state is like a fingerprint, and I agree with Doug completely. There are some aspects of transit that may fit in each region, but in addition to that, there are other transportation approaches, and it's not just roads and bridges. There are pedestrian pathways and a series of other things that can and should be done, and the more that we can do, particularly in this age of technology, where we can share projects and share insights and do it on a visual basis, quite frankly, even mobile tours where we're taking people around the state, urban to rural, rural to urban, and having the capacity for us to witness the lifestyles that are experienced will only help enhance the quality of the state. We are a very vibrant state. We've got a lot of opportunities. We've got a multitude of regions that are separate and distinct. I've got tremendous pride in Georgia, and I'm extremely proud of the way that the counties have conducted themselves in terms of representing their constituencies. But I think what's important is that, again, we do not declare victory and move forward. I think that we realize that thanks to the leadership at the state level, thanks to the hard work of cross-section of public and private sector folks, that we can have opportunities like are in front of us. And in order for us to experience this in the future, as the population continues to increase and as we have new demands placed upon us, that we don't have to reformulate an alliance and reformulate a communication pattern. We need to take great strides as we move forward, and I know that ACCG stands ready to be part of that. And we want to again thank you for allowing us to be part of this this webinar today.
And Seth, if I can jump in to say one more thing, Ross is right in every regard, as he usually is. But I also want to point out to all of our audience today that our local governments and those of us who work with and support them, I think part of ensuring that political bandwidth stays freed up is a duty of care to ensure that we're doing the best job with expending our new transportation dollars that the General Assembly has given us the right to access, spending those dollars appropriately, thoughtfully, wisely, so that we show that we can be trusted as stewards with the money they have given us before we go back and ask for any major new ask. I think that'll be a critical part of keeping that bandwidth open and keeping that conversation and their aptitude for considering more things in the future as a possibility. And again, I'd like to thank you also for hosting this and for allowing us to be a part of it.
Well, I'm very grateful to both of you, both for your willingness to be with us today, and then also just lending your body of expertise and experience to the resources that we're trying to put together. And I would be remiss if I didn't say on behalf of Chris Clark and the Chamber Board of Directors, and then Michael Sullivan and the GTA Board, how grateful we are for the partnerships that we've had both with ARC and with ACCG, and many of your individual members have been great partners with us as we've gone through this process. And I pledge to each of you that we want to continue that relationship, and as we get into what I think is an exciting new world of being able to actually think in a visionary way about how we do infrastructure in Georgia, and have some of these policy discussions about freight rail and transit and some needs that we haven't been able to discuss in a while. And then obviously what does the state look like as we're able to utilize this new T-SPLOST mechanism that we continue to work with y'all. We want to serve alongside each of you in whatever capacity is needed. So thank you very much for your time today, and I appreciate y'all being with us. For those of you that are on the webcast, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. This is our last webinar of 2015. We've had excellent response and interest. We will be doing these again next year in a variety of media, and we'll look forward to getting that information back out to you at the beginning of the year. GTA will be launching a new website in the next week to 10 days, and all of these webinars will be archived on our website for your access and viewing pleasure at that time. You can get us at gatransportation.org. And then always, if you have specific questions or need information, feel free to send us an email at info@gatransportation.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So with that, thank you all. Have a happy holidays, and we will talk to you all after the first of the year.